I was standing in the bridal suite with my robe still on, curling iron sitting cold in my maid of honor's hand, when my mother's text came through. I read it 3 times before I accepted. That it said what it said. "We're so sorry, sweetheart. The baptism is running long. We'll try to make the reception." No phone call, no warning. 9:47 in the morning on the day I was supposed to walk down the aisle with my father. And that was all I got. A text message with a period at the end, like a door closing. I set my phone face down on the vanity. In the mirror, I could see my maid of honor watching me. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she sat down next to me, put her hand over mine, and said quietly, "Faye, whatever you need right now, I'm here. I am 32 years old. I am a registered nurse. I have sat with people in their final hours and kept my voice level when nothing around me was." I thought I had built myself into someone who didn't shatter. But looking at my reflection in that bridal suite, hair done, face half finished, white dress hanging on the hook behind me, I felt something in my chest crack straight through. My name is Faye, and for most of my life I knew, without anyone ever having to say it directly, exactly where I ranked in my own family. My brother was 4 years older than me and had been the axis everything else revolved around, since before I was old enough to understand what that meant. He was the one who got the car at 16, the one whose college was paid in full while I graduated nursing school with $47,000 in loans and no offer of help. When he opened his first business and it failed 2 years later, my parents quietly absorbed the loss. When I needed $1,000 to cover a deposit on my first apartment, my mother told me they just didn't have extra right now. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked, and I had made a kind of peace with it, the way you make peace with weather. You don't like it, but you stop expecting it to change. I spent 11 months planning my wedding. Jonah and I had been together for 4 years by then. He was a mechanical engineer, a careful, steady, plainly decent man, and I wanted the day to be right. Not extravagant, just right. I confirmed every detail with my family myself. My father promised, more than once, that he would walk me down the aisle. My mother came with me to tour the venue. My grandmother, on my father's side, had died 3 years before the wedding, and I carried a small ache about that constantly. She was the one person in that family who had always been in my corner without conditions. And part of why I cared about the wedding was that she would have wanted to see it. 5 days before the ceremony, my brother announced a baptism. His son had been born 7 weeks earlier. He explained that the priest at their church had one available date, and that date happened to fall on the same Saturday as my wedding. He presented it as a logistics problem. A coincidence. He was sorry about it in the specific, frictionless way that people are sorry when they are not actually sorry. Lots of, "you know how these things go," and a quick change of subject. I told myself my parents would handle it. They had 11 months of notice about my wedding. They had 7 weeks for the baptism. The math was not hard. My father called me 2 days later. His voice was the same voice he had used when I was 19, and he told me there was no money for my study abroad. Semester even, apologetic, completely final. He said the baptism was a sacrament. He said the priest's calendar couldn't be moved. He said my brother and his wife needed the whole family right now with a newborn. He said I had Jonah's people. He said he knew I understood. I told him yes. I think I even believed it in that moment. My mother sent the text the morning of the wedding. My brother didn't reach out at all. The ceremony started at 11. When the coordinator asked if I wanted an escort down the aisle, I said no. I was going to walk alone or not at all, and I chose alone. Jonah's side of the church was full. His parents, his sister, his coworkers, every person he had ever introduced me to who could book a flight or drive to Charlotte on a Saturday in October. On my side, there were 4 people. My college roommate, a friend from the hospital floor, and my childhood best friend with her husband. 4 people in a venue that seated 180. I made a decision somewhere between the sanctuary doors and the altar. I decided their absence would not be what I remembered. Jonah was standing at the front, and when I came through those doors and he saw me, the look on his face was enough to carry me the length of that aisle, and then some. We got married. The reception ran until midnight. The food was good and the dancing was real, and at no point did I look at my phone. I left it in the bridal suite on silent and walked away from it deliberately, the way you walk away from something that has already taken enough from you. We flew to Vermont the next morning. Jonah had just accepted a position with a commercial real estate development firm called Mercer and Associates, and part of his signing package was a 5-night voucher at one of their partner properties, a private lakeside inn in the Northeast Kingdom. The inn ran about $2,000 a night. We couldn't have afforded it on our own, and we both knew it. And so we moved through that place, with the slightly stunned gratitude of people handling something unexpectedly wonderful. On the second morning, we had breakfast on the private dock. The lake was flat and silver. The fog was burning off in long, slow rolls, and the foliage was full October, red and gold to the tree line in every direction. And Jonah poured sparkling wine into my glass at 9 in the morning because he said the honeymoon ran on its own time zone with its own rules. I laughed in a way I hadn't laughed in weeks. I took one photo: the dock, the wine glass, the mist coming off the water, the trees behind it. The inn's carved wooden sign was visible in the upper corner: Arden Lake Estate, dark letters against white birch. I posted it with a caption that just said "Home for now" and a location tag, then set my phone inside and went back to looking at the lake. 40 minutes later, I had 289 missed calls. My first thought was that someone had died. My hands were shaking as I unlocked the screen and saw that every single call was from my family: my father, my mother, my brother, my sister-in-law, 2 aunts, my uncle, all of them. In under an hour. I called my father back. He answered before the first ring finished. His voice was not the voice of someone with bad news. It was something I had never heard from him before, furious and frightened at exactly the same time. And he didn't waste a single word. "Faye, what are you doing at Arden Lake Estate?" I almost laughed. The question was so strange. "We're on our honeymoon." Jonah's firm gave us a voucher. It was part of his signing package. Which firm? Not a question. Something had shifted in his voice. "Mercer and Associates. They do commercial real estate. Dad, why are you?" "Faye." A long silence. When he spoke again, the anger was still there, but something had been stripped out from underneath it. "What has anyone at that firm told you about the Whitfield property?" I looked at Jonah, who had come in from the bathroom and was reading my face carefully. "Dad, I don't know what you're talking about. What property?" He told me to call him back and hung up. I sat there a moment. Then I opened my laptop and typed in what he had said: "Whitfield property, Charlotte, NC." And then, because something in my gut had started running ahead of my understanding, I searched for something I hadn't thought about in years: my grandfather's estate attorney. 3 years after my grandfather died, a letter had arrived at my parents' address. My mother had forwarded it to me without explanation while I was in the middle of nursing school finals. I had glanced at the letterhead, assumed it was routine, and filed it somewhere in the back of a drawer. I had never called the number on it. But I had photographed the letter once, years ago, when I was cleaning out old papers, for no particular reason except that something about it had felt like something to hold on to. I found the photo in my camera roll. I found the attorney's name. I called him. He sounded like a man who had been waiting a long time. My grandfather had died when I was 26. He had owned a 2-story commercial building on Whitfield Avenue in Charlotte for over 30 years. Office space on the second floor, retail on the ground level. And he had built it up quietly, the way men of his generation built things, without ever making much noise about it. When he died, he left the building to me. Not to my parents, not to my brother. Specifically to me, because, as the attorney read from the actual trust document in a voice that was carefully, professionally even, My grandfather had written that I was the one who will put it to good use. The trust had one condition. My parents were appointed co-trustees until I either turned 35 or got legally married, whichever happened first. When that trigger occurred, full control transferred to me automatically, and the trustees were legally required to file a complete financial accounting with the probate court within 60 days. Every lease payment collected, every expense paid, every dollar that had moved through the trust during their management period. The building had been fully leased for all 7 years since my grandfather's death. The attorney told me the total rental income collected during those 7 years. $1.3 million. I put the phone down on the bed and sat completely still. Jonah sat next to me. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Outside, the lake was silver and the fog was gone, and the whole landscape looked utterly indifferent to what I had just learned. My parents had collected $1.3 million from a building that belonged to me. For 7 years, they had deposited it into a trust account they controlled, and then used it however they chose. My brother's down payment on his house, $160,000. His first business failure, $80,000 absorbed and gone. His second, another $60,000, a truck, a renovation, his wife's SUV. And the baptism that had required every member of my family to abandon my wedding and drive across town on a Saturday morning, had been held at a private event venue that cost $11,000 for the day. All of it was my money my grandfather had left for me specifically, because he believed I would use it well. The reason my father's voice had broken when I mentioned Mercer and Associates. They were tenants in my building. They had occupied a suite on the second floor for 3 years. They knew the property existed, and their newest employee had just married the woman whose name was on the deed. I had not known any of this. Not because anyone had hidden the fact of its existence. It was probate court record, public and accessible. But because no one had ever told me there was anything to look for, and I had been, my whole life, the kind of person who didn't ask for what she hadn't been told she had coming. When I signed my marriage certificate, the trust transferred. The 60-day audit clock started. And my parents, who had spent 7 years treating my grandfather's building like a private account, suddenly had less than 2 months to account for every dollar they had spent from it. My phone kept ringing for the rest of that afternoon. I let it go. My father called 6 more times before I picked up again. He was not the same man who had opened with fury. He was asking me, plainly, without any of his usual composure, to sign a document delaying the audit, just to give them time, he said. Just to let them sort it out privately. He said there had been a misunderstanding about how the trust was structured. He said the money had been used for the family. He said he had always intended to repay it before the transfer happened. He would give us a proper wedding reception. He would explain everything. He just needed more time. I asked him how much time he needed to explain, not walking me down the aisle. He didn't answer that. My mother took the phone. She was crying in a way I had not heard since my grandmother's funeral. She said they had only done what they did because my brother needed a real foundation, a true start, and that I had always been so capable and independent that they had believed I would be fine without the help. She said she hoped I could understand that they hadn't meant to hurt me. I told her I understood perfectly, every part of it. My brother called last. His voice was the one that surprised me most. Not because of what he said, but because he sounded genuinely frightened, and not of the legal outcome. He was frightened of what I thought of him. He said he hadn't known the full picture. He said he was sorry. He said he would pay me back personally, on his own, outside of whatever the court decided. I told him that was a matter for the audit and the judge. I called the attorney back that evening from the dock, sitting in the dark with the lake black and still in front of me. I told him to file on schedule. No extensions, no negotiations outside of formal legal channels. No delays of any kind. I thanked him for his patience. He said my grandfather had chosen well. I said I was beginning to understand that he had. The audit took 4 months. The probate court appointed an independent CPA, and what came back was thorough and specific and impossible to argue with. 7 years of rental income, every transaction documented, and nearly none of it held in trust for me. The court found my parents in breach of fiduciary duty. Facing criminal charges for embezzlement, they chose full civil restitution with penalties. They sold the house. It was paid off, their one solid asset. And they sold it in a hurry in a slow market and walked away with far less than it was worth. My father cashed out his retirement account, which triggered taxes and early withdrawal penalties that swallowed a significant portion of what remained. My brother surrendered assets that had been purchased with trust funds. The truck, equipment from the businesses, other things I didn't track closely because I didn't need to. His wife's SUV was returned to the dealership. By the time the restitution was finalized, everything they had built over 2 decades of careful hoarding was gone. My parents moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Charlotte. My brother and his wife moved into a rental in a neighborhood they would not have looked at twice 18 months earlier. I own the building on Whitfield Avenue. The tenants are still there. Mercer and Associates still occupies the 2nd floor, which Jonah finds funny in a quiet way. He goes to the office 5 days a week in a building that belongs to his wife, and no one in that office knows it. The rental income deposits directly into our account. Last spring, Jonah and I used it as the down payment on a house of our own, a real one in our names that no one else can touch. I don't have a relationship with my parents. That is not something I say to be dramatic. It is just the shape of things now, a fact as plain as an address or a date. They did not call on my birthday this year. I did not call on theirs. Some things, when they break the way ours broke, do not have a path back that both people are willing to walk. What I carry with me instead is something simpler. On an October morning in Charlotte, with 4 people on my side of the church and 200 empty seats, I made a choice to walk forward anyway. Not because I was strong in some exceptional way, not because I had already known what was coming. Just because Jonah was standing at the front of that aisle with a look on his face that made the empty seats completely irrelevant. My grandfather spent 40 years building something and put my name on it because he believed I would use it well. He never told me. He just did it, quietly, and trusted that I would eventually find my way to understanding. I spent 32 years being told, in every way except out loud, that I was second. It turns out my grandfather spent 40 years making sure I didn't have to stay there. What would you have done? Would you have found a way to settle it privately with your family? Or would you have let the court run its full course? Drop the city you're watching from in the comments below. I read every single one.